Hi, this is my ETEC 562 Technology Integration Project, and I'm Jacqueline Long. The objectives that I chose to cover in this unit were science TEKs and math TEKs. However, I do believe that you could include ELA and social studies, but I'm just focusing on the science and math. So the science TEKs that we're using, the student is expected to apply the design process in a team, develop and test the model for the project, and present the project using clear and concise communication skills. The math TEKs that we're covering is that the student is expected to develop a system for keeping and using financial records and balance a simple budget. The required technology, you have to have access to computers, Powtoon, Google Docs, Google Sheets, and Google Slides. The intended audience that I chose was 5th grade. This lesson would take about 2 weeks to accomplish, and it would have to be during the 45-minute science block. The learning theory models that I chose to cover was the anchored instruction theory, and this is at play in the lesson because it's introduced with a real-world problem and it's through a video. It grabs the learner's attention, and it's something that the students can refer back to continuously through this project. Another learning model that kind of ties into this is the engaged learning model, and it's because students have to find information and explain their findings and research. And then it's all going to be displayed in a Google slide presentation at the end of the project. The instructional design that I chose to use with this project is the engineering design process. The engineering design process has 5 major steps. So prerequisites before you can even start this project, your students would have to have a basic knowledge of Google Docs, Google Slides, and Google Sheets. They would also need to understand how to research on the district's databases. So you'd have to be able to trust them, and they need research skills. So the first step in the engineering design process is identifying the problem. So students will be introduced to the problem through a Powtoon. This ties in with that anchored theory. So along with that, there would be a reference sheet that kind of has all this information on it as well. But the students can refer back to this, this video throughout the entire project, as well as their reference sheet. So the next step in the engineering design process is brainstorming. So students will be broken into groups of 5 to brainstorm how they can build a bridge. This will be when students research types of bridges and collaborate on which one would work best. So students will be brainstorming ideas in a Google Doc so that they can collaborate outside of school too. This is where they'll talk about what they've found, websites that they can go back to and share with each other. This is just kind of going to be their place where they put all the information that they find in this Google Doc. The next step is the design aspect. So this is where the designing actually happens. So students will create blueprints for their bridges on paper. They must use rulers and have correct measurements for how they will build their bridge. This is also where students will begin to discuss materials and budgets. So this is where they start kind of creating, they take their research and they turn it into blueprints. They turn it into the building process before they actually start building. Because next step is the building, the test, the evaluation, redesign, and that's kind of cyclical. So they redesign, then they build, then they test, and they evaluate. It's kind of over and over. This is the experimenting part. This is where students will actually begin to build their bridge. They'll test what they have built, discuss and evaluate what they have built, and then redesign to make the best possible bridge with the materials and budget that they have, which is $15. Um, at the very end, once they've tested and they've accomplished the goal, which is to get the baseball across the bridge, they will share their solution. So this is where students will display and explain the bridge that they chose and display their final model. The students will create a presentation to sell their bridge and to display their design process and their budget within Google Slides. So their budget's going to be on a Google Sheet, which they will use. It's kind of like an Excel spreadsheet, so they'll use that to kind of display how many pens they used, how much that cost, how many straws they used, how much that cost, and it's all going to be in their Google slide, which they will be presenting to sell to the mayor of Cityville. So it kind of adds a fun aspect, a real world fun aspect to that. And then I have some example, or I have a example. I had pulled some students to kind of play with this, and we created an example. So here's an example bridge presentation. So they talk about their problem, the sketches from when they made their bridge. These were their blueprints, the construction, and the issues that they faced when they were constructing, the measurements for their final bridge, the pros versus cons of this bridge, and then their finished bridge. And their budget, I inputted this from Google Slides, and then I inputted a chart from Google Slides for the budget. And so then they would just come up in front of the class and present just as if they were presenting this to the actual mayor. So that's my bridge project and all of the requirements. I'd love to hear your feedback. Thank you.